Tell me not in mournful numbers life's an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, and dust returneth, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment, and not sorrow, is our destined in our way, but to act that each tomorrow find us further than today. Art is long, and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, departing, leaving behind us footprints in the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing over life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to paint. That poem is named The Song of Life. And it's by my father's favorite poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. My father was a lawyer, and he grew up in West Texas on a poor cotton farm. But he had an artist mother who taught him to love poetry and great literature. And I recall on occasions when we would travel with our family from West Texas to the mountains of New Mexico, he would recite favorite poems on the trip. And this made a tremendous impact on me because it basically gave me permission to appreciate and love art and beauty. And the demo today is going to be dealing with some aspects of art and beauty. And it is going to be, as it's been entitled, The Power of Contrast. And if you notice in that poem, it was a poem of contrast that ran through the entire structure of the poem. Life is real. Life is earnest. Death is not its goal. Dust thou art, and dust returneth, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined in our way, but to act that each tomorrow find us further than today. Art is long. Time is fleeting. Be not like dumb-driven cattle. Be a hero. Even the end of the poem goes still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor. And I have to admit, I changed the last word of this poem. It should be still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. The poet here ended with the contrast of work and rest. Learn to labor and to wait. So he used contrast in a very powerful way. And when you talk about contrast, you're talking about something that runs through every aspect of a painting, and we'll touch on that here in a minute. But even as a ignorant West Texas cowboy, I could have told you the same thing that this poem said much more simply. And it goes something like this. Life is short, so get off your butt and do something. But Longfellow didn't engage in the mundane. He transcended the mundane. He told a story. He painted a word picture using contrast in this case. And aren't we as artists seeking to transcend our experience, transcend the visual world, and to bring a greater meaning than just the obvious mundane experience that most people have? And so contrast lends itself to greatly increasing the ability of expression if it's handled well and understood. When I began my fine art career many years ago, I didn't really understand contrasts, that principle, and what it was involved in. In fact, I didn't understand hardly any of the basic principles of art and painting. And I became very frustrated. And I didn't know really how to start a painting or how to end it. And even when I got into it, it would become a mess very quickly. I didn't know how to fix it. And it would become very discouraging. And a lack of certainty or confidence in being able to really bring a painting to what I had envisioned in my mind. And this creates fear and insecurity. It creates timidity in your painting, which destroys spontaneity and the creativity that needs to be flowing when you're doing a painting at its best. And so I realized kind of early on that I was going to burn out if I continued in this way, that I was going to lose my passion for painting. Well, on another road trip to the mountains of New Mexico, which I love to paint, my father told us about his first experience as a lawyer. He graduated from law school, University of Texas, at the age of 21 and started his legal practice. And his very first trial or case that he had was for for a farmer whose crops had been destroyed by the railroad because they had put in an overpass that had caused the water, when it rained, to flood his fields and ruin his crop. So the day of the trial, he and the farmer were sitting there at the front at the table, and in marched 7 high-priced lawyers in fancy suits from the railroad. And he said it was obvious that these guys were trying to intimidate this young lawyer and to impress the judge. Well, my dad won the case. He went on to become an assistant attorney general of Texas, and then had a long legal career. And the reason I mention that is because he told me the strategy of how he won that case. And that strategy I have used over the years for many things very effectively in overcoming struggles of one kind or another. And I had not really thought to apply it to my art business, to my art career. So I took that strategy and started applying it to my art career, and it revolutionized it, took away the fear and frustration, and I was able to basically maintain my passion for art because of it. And the strategy was very simple. And you know, all great ideas are simple, aren't they? Not always easy, but they're simple. And this one was and is simple. And the strategy he had, or that he told us about as a lawyer, was this. always be better prepared than your opponents. Know their case better than they know it, so that you could try their side of it if you were called to do it. Being better prepared. Anytime a person is better prepared, he's hard to beat. And so I realized I wasn't prepared to be a fine artist. That was my problem. And so I started doing a lot of study and took on a mentor and developed what I call the divine setup, which I mentioned earlier. And basically the divine setup is just 7 universal principles of art along with a particular working procedure that hopefully takes a canvas from being an obstacle to being an opportunity. And so today we're going to be talking about applying some of these principles, particularly in the area of contrast. And just to give you a little preamble, more or less, to the demo, the 7 principles I mentioned are basically design, value, shapes, edges, temperature, unity, and perspective. And if you think about design, the way you get the eye of the viewer to look at your center of interest is where you put your most contrast. And values, it's about the contrast between light and dark. And when you're talking about shapes, it's a contrast between small and large shapes, and simple and complex shapes. When you're talking about edges, you're talking about the contrast of hard and soft edges, as receding and advancing edges. When you're talking about temperature, you're talking about contrast between warm and cool. In unity, you're talking about the moods, simplicity and complex moods. In perspective, you're talking about the contrast of near and far. So contrast runs through every aspect of your painting. And so I'm going to go ahead and start that demo. I'll go ahead and mention that I'm going to be working on an ampersand board. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's pastel ampersand board with a slight sanded type surface. It's 16 by 20, toned. It's about a 50% value in terms of the board. And I'll be using the my setup here for pastels. Basically, I organize my pastels warm on the left-hand side, cool on the right-hand side, and dark, moving from dark to the lighter value, so that I pretty much know where my colors are. And once I use this a few times, I know exactly where every color is I want. Even though you will see, I still do a lot of hunting and pecking, trying to find the right color. This is going to be the photo source that I'm working with. I will tell you that I normally, actually in the studio, paint from a large digital monitor. And Nick, if you would, I'm just going to pass these around just so you'll get a closer look at what the subject is, because it might be hard to see here.
What kind of pastels are you using?
Oh, well, just about everything. I've got hard pastels, new pastels, generally speaking. And then I have what I think of as kind of semi-soft pastels, which are Rembrandts. And then I have a large number of Terry Ludwig and some Sennelier and some Unison and Mount Vision. So a little bit of everything.
You might mention also that this is his invention.
Yeah, this is my pastel porter that I developed and built years ago, and I got tired of building the boxes, and China quit being a possible outlet for making the boxes cheap enough to sell them. So I don't even sell them anymore. If you're interested in starting a business and you know a good woodworker that can make boxes, I will be glad to work a deal with you. Okay, so let me get started on this.
You need more light.
No, that's plenty of light.
Okay.
I'll tell you that I didn't bring my tester. I have a deal. When I was a commercial photographer for about 30 years, I used a little thing from Kodak that I could hold it up and it would tell me whether the light was warm or cool, which I should have brought with me today because I'm not sure if these are balanced or not, but obviously it's better to work with balanced lighting. But if I have a choice, I'd rather work in low light than strong light. Because in low light, I tend to put my colors in lighter and brighter. If I have a strong light, my painting starts getting dark and dull. And as my mentor, Ben Canas, used to say, paint light and bright, not dark and dull. So that's my philosophy, put in simple terms. Okay, so in order to speed up this process, I went ahead and did a sketch. I didn't think you needed to see how to do a sketch. I just wanted to show you how I work with the paint. And let's see, feel free to ask questions. I won't necessarily answer them, but feel free to ask questions. And I'll try to as best I can describe my process as I go through this. But I will tell you just the simple procedure is I put in my darkest darks, and then my secondary darks, and then of course the tone canvas serves as my middle tone, and then I put in my lightest light, and then my secondary light, so that I'm always working towards the middle tone. It helps keep your values in control in my mind. If you just go from dark to light, if you get a little off, you very easily go off, and either your lights will go way too light or they'll become way too dark. So, anyway, we'll talk about that as I go. And let me see here. I don't always wear gloves, but when I do, it's only in my left hand. I don't like to wear gloves on my right hand, which I draw paint with, because gloves retain the powder or the pastel, and then you start picking up every pastel, and it just gets dirtier and dirtier. Your fingers, because they're oily, don't pick up the pastel dust as much, and so you can move from one pastel to the other without transferring all that dirty dust. Okay, and speaking of that, if you're concerned about the pastel getting on you, the modern pastels are pretty safe, but you can buy this lotion you can put on your hands that will protect them considerably. I'm sitting well below what I normally do when I paint, so that hopefully you can see a little bit better. That's my sacrifice today. So, let's see. So obviously, when I look at this picture and I squint a little bit, the darks are this upper third, and then this water running through here. Those are my basic darks with a little bit of detail that's got some darks in it. But that's the big simple darks in the picture, and that's where I start. And I will tell you, in terms of darks, I generally put in my darks larger than they may actually be, because your darks create your abstract design of the painting. And the abstract design is very important. It's the first thing I look for in a reference. Do I see a strong abstract design? And this has got a big block of dark. This dark coming through. It's nice, simple design, abstract design. And one important part about it is a rule of 80. When you're looking at your darks, I want 80% of my darks to be touching, because that creates unity in the picture. So this one, virtually all of the darks are touching, so that your eye can move through the entire dark field without jumping over anything hardly. That creates strong unity. And the other side is also true. 80% of your lights, if you can do them so that they're touching, you create a very strong, unified image. Okay. As I said, I start with my darks being a little larger than they might actually be, and I also put them in fairly lightly, not too heavy, so I can paint over them. Because a dark in a painting is like a sculptor's stone. It's what you cut into to create your shapes and your other values. So if you make your dark too small, when you start cutting into it, you start destroying it. So let's shut up and start working here.
What pastel is that?
This is I think it's a unison black. I don't typically start with blacks, but in this case, they just worked out. And I don't typically blend much, but when I do, I use my left hand. I don't want this to be too heavily loaded with pigment. I did want to darken it up nice and dark. Okay. I don't worry about being fuzzy and imprecise at the beginning, because as I paint, I will increase the precision and sharpness as needed. Okay, and then because this board is rather, it's basically a sanded board, but it's not like a Kitty Wallace. It's not a very strong texture, so I want to be careful about building up and not getting too heavy an application in the early setup of this painting.
Do you use those ampersand boards regularly?
I have been using them more regularly. I use probably more than anything, though, the Premier paper, Premier Pastel sanded paper, and the Kitty Wallace, which I have stored in a safe in my basement. As I said, I like to work fairly loose in the early stage of the painting. I want to feel kind of fluid. Now, this is a Rembrandt, and it is so much harder. I mean, you got to really work at it. Whereas this Ludwig is just jumps off of the stick, basically. Talk about the warm and cool contrast here. Getting into some more of that. A little early for that. You stick with the stronger.
Do you usually start with a clean sketch or a thumbnail?
Yeah, I usually do some thumbnailing on the in the field when I'm doing plein air. When I'm working in the studio, I kind of do my thumbnails on the computer and test out values and so forth that way. And designs. It's I've spent many of my years in commercial art on a computer, and I feel comfortable working with it. So that's something that I've really been able to take advantage of, is using a computer for the early stages of the painting and work out problems with design and color and so forth. Okay.
What program?
Well, it used to be Photoshop, but now it's Photoshop Elements, because the regular Photoshop has far more than you'll ever need in terms of, power. Nice thing about this foam is every time I put a pastel in or out, it wipes off the dust. I tend to keep my, when I'm doing water, my strokes, tend to keep them horizontal. It helps lay it down a little bit. Generally speaking, I like to make my strokes in the direction that the land is, the topology. If it's sloped, then I tend to go sloped. If it's flat, I'd like to go horizontal. And obviously skies and water are horizontal as a rule. Let's see. Kind of a layering process. putting a dark blue green over red burnt sienna here. Tone it down. It's a nice thing about your darks is you put them on good and dark, but then they're easy to work over. Change them from warm to cool as you think you need them.
Mike, do you choose the color of your ampersand board as it refers to your subject matter, or is it always green?
No, it's more often than not, it's a middle tone gray, or sometimes a kind of a clay surface look, but not often on the green. I just, I found the ampersand. I got a good deal on it. One of the deals here in Albuquerque, what do they call that? They have every other year.
IX.
IX. I tend to go and buy things that I can get a good deal on there, so I have to be able to buy a bunch of ampersand cheap, but I'm trying to get rid of it. Okay.
Do you ever use the white and tone it yourself, or
Do you ever use what?
the white ampersand
Oh yeah, I'm going to be using some white.
On the board.
on the board?
Do you ever use the whiteboard and tone it yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I see what you're saying. Yes, but I tone it very quickly. Like I might start with white, and then I'll put large values over it real quickly, because you can't judge value very well with whites. Okay, let me get some more. Kind of reestablishing my darks. Whenever I realize I've painted away a dark, I reestablish it very quickly, because everything is keyed to my darks in terms of value. So if my dark get too light, all my other values get too light. Okay. See. Used to take workshops from Albert Handel about 20 years ago. He came out to Palo Duro Canyon when I lived in Amarillo, and he did these great demos. And he'd go, I feel a little warmth over here. He'd just grab a color and start, like that. It really opened my eyes, to being sensitive. Just, okay, I feel a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And let your instinct take over. Okay, help me. This way here. Okay. So, I think I'll call it a day. Okay, so I'm going to work in some of my lights here.
Is that white?
This is white.
Okay.
Just white. Well, I used to avoid using white like the devil, but found out I could work over it if I felt like it was too strong in places. But one thing I finally got over after being a commercial artist for years is trying to be too literal in depicting it. Everything for a long time was really an illustration rather than what I considered painting. So I kind of forced myself to think in terms of impressions rather than trying to depict it as if I were working for the Bureau of Land Management and they were going to use it to build a map or something. I found that the end result is, somebody has this painting or I have it. I'm not going to really be so concerned about whether it's depicting that scene or if it's just an enjoyable painting.
Do you ever pick out your palette first, or did you ever, or did you always pick your colors as you go on?
Well, this is pretty much my palette, but yeah, I usually end up working with just a handful of colors by the time the painting is done. Oh, again, I'm reestablishing some values here. And that basically, let's see. Like if I have a gray, I tend to try to interpret it in terms of a blue-gray or blue-violet rather than just a dead gray, even though I do use just pure gray on occasion. We'll have a little snap color.
What color is that? It's hard to see with the lighting.
This is real light, what do you call it, ultramarine, I suppose.
The time is 11:30, Mike?
Do you know which cast iron you're using? Is that a,
This is a Ludwig, just a, what would you call it? Kind of an umber sienna.
that's good.
These dark areas are reflecting the shadow on the shoreline, but they're also catching some green being reflected back in those trees there. And so you've got some green playing around in this water. Different I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I generally only blended water in backgrounds and sky and stuff. I try to avoid blending. I want the nature of the pastel to show. I'm not trying to hide the fact that it's a pastel. Now let's see. Reaching up there. Make sure the greens and changes over here.
It is 11:45.
You would probably work well in a execution block of a prison. Sometimes I'm asked, how do you know when you're finished with painting? I'm sure you've never gotten that question. But the answer is, the painting is finished when the edges are finished. And that's always the last thing I work on, the edges. Okay.
Rivers where you can see the bottom of the river, those rocks reflecting under there, different layers is really something. Just like a little more time to go through this. $5 bird. Love it. Love it. Got it in. Been using primarily soft pastels throughout. You almost have to on this ampersand because it doesn't take hard pastels at all. Hardly. When in doubt, go to purple.
5 minutes. It was funny, but can you explain why you go to purple when you're in doubt?
Because I just love purple, and partly because it's such a good blend of warm and cool. It's not really cool. It's not really warm. It's just a middle, and it's like a gray. It can go warm or cool very easily, and so it just works very well in places. Like this is a dark purple here. I'm using to refine some edges. And it's,
Where is the photo from?
the caldera up there, Benton Lake area, which I remember painting up in that area with Ann. Wasn't that you? Did we painted, remember, on Benton Lake years ago?
Are you saying me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't do that one.
Yeah, I think it was. We were standing on the bridge. Edges, edges, edges. Warmth in there, just to punch it up a little bit. As long as you stay in the same value range, you can put anything in. That's good there.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
She's gonna shoot you.
Started out with my darks and then you got my darks. I'll have it in a couple more hours and it'll be finished.
Looks great.
Tell them how you know that the darks are touching.
I'm sorry, what?
Tell them how you know that the darks are all touching.
You can pour.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, she's actually the one behind that knows. Just think of it as if the darks were a volume like a bottle or pitcher and you pour water in it, if the water will run all the way through and fill up all your darks, then they're all touching. So that's why I'll actually make an effort to put a little bridge in here. And all my darks will be touching. Thank you. Appreciate it. So if whoever told me I'm going to take their pictures, paintings, be sure and remind me before I leave today. So I've already got a volunteer.
We'll take it to count.
Yeah, they were taking them to the house. But thanks a lot. I appreciate it.